Turning first to the national disk. This will bring together material in data, text and picture form on a wide range of subjects. It'll include a wealth of detailed national statistical information supplemented by published articles from newspapers and magazines, extracts from Hansard and other specialist sources, and over 2,000 commissioned essays. It'll also have exclusive data gathered by the project's 1 million local contributors, detailing land cover and amenities, from shops to post offices, banks to football grounds. To give an idea of the enormous breadth of this information, let's have a look at the Domesday Project Index. Now, to make the system user-friendly, in other words, simple, flexible and responsive, it's organised like a thesaurus rather than a conventional index. Every idea in it gives rise to many others, like a family tree spreading out into more and more branches. The national disk is divided into 4 central subject areas:
culture, economy, society and environment.
Hello and welcome back to another Archaeo-Scope. This series is like an inverted Questions of Doom, where rather than you sending me a question to try and answer to the best of my ability, incidentally there are a few questions of doom that I need to get around to answering, I instead have had a thought, an idea, have made an observation, hence the scope, that I want to share with you in the form of a video, and together we can consider, discuss and debate in the comments below, and hopefully come away from that conversation with a thought, an idea, a notion, a list of bullet points that one of us on our own may not have considered or formulated. It's an opportunity to crystallize my own ideas and thoughts in many cases, but also hopefully an opportunity for an interesting conversation. And today's Archaeoscope is inspired by the events of the past couple of weeks on Twitter. It's been a hot mess, has it not? It's been an absolute cluster, and it's been fascinating to see how the supposed intent to democratize access to information, to make information ever more accurate and believable, has actually resulted in public figures, companies, politicians, celebrities being impersonated en masse, resulting in actually a tremendous amount of satire on the platform. And therefore, lots of people have been leaving. There has been a bit of an exodus from Twitter and to platforms like Mastodon. I've actually started my own Mastodon account. If you want to, feel free to follow me there. I'll put a link below. But I'm not going to be leaving Twitter just yet, not least because I've already tweeted 30,000 plus times. I'm a little bit invested. But also, actually, because I can't help but think of ancient analogies here, particularly from the classical world, and how the movement of people, in particular their data, to other platforms doesn't represent necessarily the death toll, the bell ringing for Twitter. It may actually represent a proliferation of data that has a better chance of surviving into the future. What I mean by this is that the Roman world, the Greek world, the Egyptian world, the Middle East, North Africa, all of these places have writing traditions that have survived, and particularly the more well-known writers, Cicero, Tacitus, these things have survived because not just that they were written down, but because they were written down and shared in many places. One of the things that Mrs. Soup absolutely loves, she's currently in the office above me, in her former life as a philologist, when she reconstructed and implied languages that no longer exist by studying their daughters, their currently existing languages, or their granddaughters, etc., was that actually when you look at ancient documents, particularly Cicero, the copies are all agreeing with each other. The same goes even, for example, for gospel texts, for example. Lots of ancient texts are copy to such an exacting degree, such a to perfect extent, that you can have a high level of confidence in not so much necessarily exactly what they're saying. You don't have to believe in the gospel just because all the gospels agree with each other. But you have to at least understand and recognize that the documents are saying what they intended to say. For example, there are various copies of various documents that have survived because they were in various places at various times. And so no one of them was subject to total loss. I mean, of course, there are some documents that we only have one copy of, perhaps, but it increases the chance of survival. It's actually almost a biological sort of Darwinian approach, isn't it, to spreading your risk? Animals that have lots of young are more likely to see some of those young survive, and in that sense, authors who proliferate their writings in lots of different places, and more to the point, in formats that agree with each other, are more likely to see that data, that information pass, for example, from the classical world into the Islamic world, and then back into medieval Europe, for example, as lots of this stuff did, because they can be compared and contrasted, but also as well because the proliferation of a format meant that people carried on adopting that format in nuanced new ways, in their own language, for example, or in different writing styles and texts and formats and so on and so forth. So the fact that platforms like Mastodon have a broadly Twitter format, they have more character count and less media features at the moment, but unless people are using it in a very similar way, could actually ensure the medium to long-term survival of Twitter-like data and Twitter as a historical record. And I find that an interesting prospect. The counterpoint to that would be, and I'll leave a link to this at the end of this video, would be formats that were very specific and niche. So in that video, there's a little exploration of one case study is an attempt to create a Domesday book analogy in, I think, 1986, perhaps.
In the year 1086, the Domesday Book was finally completed. A huge undertaking for its time, the first comprehensive store of national information. 900 years on, astonishingly, that achievement has never been repeated until now. The Domesday package is based on 4 elements. A double album of 12-inch laser vision discs capable of holding both pictures and data, which are played on a new interactive optical player currently being developed by Philips Electronics. It takes instructions from one of the new Master Series BBC microcomputers from Acorn computers, and the output of that is in turn displayed on a colour monitor. Now, this is a typical workstation. You select a video disc that's read by laser, you put it into the disc machine, and you can find and manipulate information simply by entering commands on the micro keyboard. Or you can use a tracker ball to move a pointer on the screen.
And they've had all this data, put it onto a particular disk system that within my lifetime, and this was like maybe 10 years ago at that point, when they went back to read that system, they couldn't, because it had been proprietary technology. It had been technology that no one else had really used or replicated or attempted to copy in any way. And so it kind of died a death. We see this with other formats. So the race for Betamax versus VHS tapes, CDs versus mini disc, Blu-ray versus HD DVD, etc. So we see this still to this day, and often a format will win out. But when that format has established itself, it becomes a very accessible means of reproducing data. And in this instance, it's not so much the platform, but I think it's the format of Twitter, of tweets, of tweeting, and that sort of constantly updating timeline that has a chance of spreading now beyond proprietary technology, in this case being just about Twitter. And I think I think that's potentially really, really important. I really do. Because also, I suppose, if you don't think about necessarily physical media, websites like Friends Reunited, MySpace. I had a MySpace page towards the end of MySpace, I think, back when I was in high school. These felt like interesting ways of presenting information, particularly if you had a band. You could put your music on your MySpace, and some musicians became very well known because of it. But it was limited by the fact that it was essentially a proprietary format as opposed to proprietary technology. It was a thing that only MySpace did, and therefore it stopped one day. And I'm kind of excited by this as a possibility, as a prospect, because if my 30,000 tweets are going to be of any use to anyone, they need to survive in some form. And that's not to say that I'm going to copy those 30,000 tweets elsewhere, but if more and more places are using a Twitter-like format, then surely that format is less likely to become irrelevant, and therefore is more likely to survive. What do you think? I'm intrigued. And also I'm intrigued by this tension that we have between data retention and sort of almost being lost to mythology. In that sense, the Roman world is so interesting to so many people because what precedes it, especially for example here in Britain, is a society where we have very little, if any, written evidence, and that written evidence tends to come via the Romans. They're on the cusp of prehistory because they were writing history, and it survived, and that's that sort of problem, that sort of potential for actually mass loss of data, is one that there are groups that attempt to get over that. There's an excellent archaeological data retention group in York who deliberately migrate their data to try and avoid digital decay. But all of this is an attempt to avoid that dark ages problem, as so called, when people lose information, lose data en masse. Yeah, what do you think? Comment below, let me know. I'm intrigued as to where this one might go. That rhymed. Until next time, do take care. Bye-bye.
Consider supporting Archaeo-Scope on Patreon for as little as $1 per month. Link available in the video description. Thank you.
Works it out. We've got ours here. There was a sacrifice to the god.